Exceptionalism for Americans is the belief that the United States is more open, more vigorous, more optimistic than other nations are. And that's what sets us apart.
It does not mean that we are better or exceptional in the sense of being better than people from other countries or societies. It means that we have come upon a form of government in our society that allows individuals to manifest their talents. And to do this over, at this point, a couple of centuries, you are going to have a successful, prosperous, and powerful society.
For the average American, American exceptionalism is the idea that they can get there on their own. The idea that they can make it, and that the government isn't going to get in their way. The government is going to stand back and let Americans be great Americans.
American exceptionalism involves the concept that people came here largely for two reasons. The first was religious freedom, and the second one was economic opportunism. But there was a third component of that, which was providence, that the people who came here thought that they were in some way being guided or directed by God.
In the American understanding, our rights are endowments that we receive from the Creator, from God Himself. The government didn't give them to us, therefore the government has no right to take them away from us.
America's the beacon of hope and opportunity, and people who want to work hard, live in freedom. They come here, and they've always come here.
When you look at this great country and what it has become in 233 years, is nothing like that replicated anywhere across the world.
The reason all my ancestors came here was not because they thought the other place that they left was really great. This is a place where they can come and accomplish things on their own.
I believe in American exceptionalism, just as I suspect that the Brits believe in British exceptionalism and the Greeks believe in Greek exceptionalism.
During his travels in 1831, French writer Alexis de Tocqueville observed that America was an exceptional nation with a special role to play in human history. Tocqueville wrote that unlike Europe, where social standing defined a citizen, America was a new republic, where liberty, equality, individualism, and laissez-faire economics defined the American creed.
Tocqueville came to America because he thought it was an exceptional place. It was a republic, a democratic republic at a time when most of Europe was monarchical.
He saw in the United States a culture arising out of limited government that was unlike anything he had ever seen.
He saw a country emerging where people really talked about what they wanted, participated in town hall meetings, cared about how they were governed, wanted to participate in that governance structure, and saw themselves as central to it.
Tocqueville was especially fascinated by the way that Americans would spend the first part of an hour talking about how they pursue their own self-interest. They maximize their profits. They're out there for themselves. And then they turn around, and the next hour they say, and because we do this, it also works for the good of the community, because in pursuing our own self-interest, there are all sorts of behaviors that also help our neighbors and that are not competitive.
And he thought that it was or could be, should be, the wave of the future.
Whereas revolution led to anarchy in France, the American Revolution produced a unique culture of freedom and opportunity. At the time of our founding, no other nation had adopted the radical ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No other nation had declared that we are endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights that no king or government could take away.
Well, they're unbelievably radical at the time of our American Revolution, the notions of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Just think about the word happiness itself, that we're allowed to pursue it. It had something very cheery about it, something very different. It wasn't draconian. It didn't feel like you were obliged to anybody but yourself. It was a liberating document in a very liberating era. Self-determination, free and fair elections, democratic process. And so it was all there at the beginning with our founding documents.
So the result of all that in the 21st century is we are a place where merit reigns, not your tribe, not your race, not your gender, not who you are, not your parents, not the place where you live, but simply the degree to which you perform and the degree to which you are an American, that you embody these protocols. And that's the only country in the world where that happens to be true.
What Jefferson believed was exceptional about the American situation in 1776 was that Americans had an environment unlike any one previous. They had no aristocracy. They were used to governing themselves. They had no artificial hierarchy. Now, for the first time, Americans in possession of natural rights had the perfect environment in which to exercise those natural rights and the freedom in which to do so.
The American experiment in democracy, the successful American experiment in democracy, makes America unique, and another word for unique is exceptional. And if you look at the rise of America in the 19th and 20th centuries, it's hard to not find that this American experience is clearly exceptional.
The very notion of American exceptionalism provokes outright hostility from some. In their view, how dare we attribute our nation's abundance, our creativity, and our productivity to some unique covenant or concept?
I don't think it's arrogant to believe in American exceptionalism, that we have a special role in history, because when we believe that, we're not believing that we as individuals are particularly special and good or virtuous, that we've done so much. We're simply acknowledging what seems to me the plain fact of history, that we stand on the shoulders of giants, that we are lucky enough to have inherited, or in the case of immigrants, to have chosen the heritage that belongs to the United States of America, the preeminence that it's achieved. So it's not a matter of arrogance. It should be a matter of humility.
I know a lot of academics shy away from wanting to believe in American exceptionalism. I'm not one of them, because I study history and see the blood on the tracks, the cost that we have for the freedoms that we have today. But I do feel that we are oftentimes in our main MO is to promote goodness. There's a reason why people from all over the world want to come and move to America. And time and again, the generosity of the United States, through all of our mistakes that we made, nevertheless, the world counts on us. Where are the Americans? We need help.
So we could use any barometer that you would like, military, economic, social, cultural. And at the end of the day, you would conclude the United States has accomplished things that Greece has not, Britain has not, France has not, Chad has not, Brazil has not. The president doesn't have to be a chauvinist to say that. He just has to be an empiricist.
Pundits and columnists on the left, like Paul Krugman of the New York Times, tell us our best days are behind us. Quote, "We've always known that America's reign as the world's greatest nation would eventually end," Krugman wrote, a philosophy that is not only profoundly negative, but also destructive.
Well, we've seen people in the academy, and indeed eminent scholars like the historian Paul Kennedy, the economist and political propagandist Paul Krugman, seeming to lick their chops at the prospect of America no longer being the number one nation of the world, no longer being unique. They seem to be taking almost a sort of adolescent attitude of saying, well, Dad, your days are numbered and you're not really so special.
The idea that this country recognizes in you your amazing potential, and that you're not a victim, and you don't need the government or some kind of apparatus to help you get there, that you have everything you already need within you. It's a really optimistic and I think celebratory view of the human experience and the human condition. as opposed to the alternative, which is a philosophy that says you're incapable. You need our help. You can't get there on your own because you're just not good enough. That's not uplifting. That's depressing. That's a pessimistic view. It really undercuts the idea of the human experience. It expects very little of humanity. I think American exceptionalism expects a lot of humanity.
Recent rallies and debates over the direction of American government are about the limits of governmental power over the lives of individual Americans.
A lot of people don't pay enough attention to Article 1, Section 8 in the Constitution. Everything that our government is allowed to do is highlighted in that article. And government is not supposed to be a helping hand. It's not supposed to be a feeding hand. It's not supposed to be a nanny. It's not supposed to be a parent. Government is there strictly to say, hey, I'm going to collect some taxes so you can all enjoy the highways. I'm also going to be here in case someone bombs you. You know, I can help protect you. And also, I'm going to make sure that you guys don't infringe upon each other, that I don't, as the government, speaking as Uncle Sam, don't infringe upon you.
Perciò lo Stato, che in Europa è considerato il garante, il tutore degli cittadini, in America è solitamente visto come un ostacolo alla libertà individuale dei cittadini.
The genius of the American system is that it recognizes that the stuff of life, and by that I mean the things that make life worth living, cannot be stage managed by government. And insofar as it does that, it strips the community of a lot of what makes it rich and vital.
The idea of an exceptional nation began in 1630 aboard the ship Arbella. Puritan John Winthrop, one of the leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, urged his fellow settlers to create a city upon a hill, a model community for the world.
And the idea of being a city set upon a hill, this wasn't a crown that Winthrop was bestowing on them. This was a challenge. Here is an opportunity. Here is 3,000 miles of distance from corrupt Europe. Here is the opportunity made by the English Civil Wars. Here is this entirely open area for you to settle in. What are you going to do with it?
But I have been guided by the standard John Winthrop set before his shipmates on the flagship Arabella 331 years ago, as they too faced the task of building a new government on a perilous frontier. We must always consider, he said, that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us. Today, the eyes of all people are truly upon us. And our governments, in every branch, at every level, national, state, and local, must be as a city upon a hill, constructed and inhabited by men aware of their great trust and their grave responsibilities.
In our founding documents, we established another extraordinary concept, that America could only be governed with the consent of the governed.
Remember, Americans, going back from the beginning, are basically anti-government, and they're anti-elitist. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want people to tell them that they're better or they're wiser than they are. And that's really reflected in the way America came together with the Declaration of Independence and then the Constitution, which spread government around in many levels and none of them to be oppressive.
Our founders also spoke of the importance of public virtue as a key to the preservation of our democracy.
Liberty and virtue mutually entail each other. There can be no liberty without virtue. Once virtue is eliminated, liberty will collapse. The individual citizen's duty is to begin with himself. We owe it to each other to cultivate virtue in ourselves. And then we're responsible for cultivating virtue, for nurturing our own children and those who are close to us, and reaching out within our communities. The primary role in inculcating virtue is with the individual and the family. Governments can't work with people as individuals. It can't nurture a child. It can't deal with a wayward teenager the way a family can, or a religious leader, a pastor, or a counselor. Government is a blunt instrument in this way. The family really is the original and best Department of Health, Education, and Welfare.
If we fail to understand American exceptionalism, we will be in danger of losing it. While these ideals are enshrined in our founding documents, we must not take these truths for granted.
There are examples of American exceptionalism throughout our history. In 1783, at the end of the Revolutionary War, General George Washington showed the world a new understanding of power and of the right of self-government.
George Washington was a great man, an incredible general, but the biggest gift he gave America after his service in the Revolutionary War was not just being president, but stepping down. By quitting, by saying there's no higher honor than to go back to Virginia and be a citizen farmer and surveyor, send a message that we are not electing presidents to be regal. We're electing them to do a job, and that they were no better or worse than any tax-paying citizen, any law-abiding person. And Washington's relinquishing of power was unusual. I mean, usually once people get the aphrodisiac of power, they cling to it. And here's Washington setting the tone and tenor of our country, saying, no, I'm stepping down. He easily could have served longer, but he wasn't about power. He was about American principle.
Upon hearing of Washington's decision to retire from power, King George III reluctantly proclaimed that Washington will be, quote, the greatest man in the world.
What Washington wanted was liberty. If he was going to get liberty for himself and for America, then he had to stand back from power. He had to back away from it. He had to voluntarily surrender it on the model of Cincinnatus and the ancient Roman Republic. When the Senate of Rome came to Cincinnatus, found him plowing in his field, and begged him to take command of Rome's armies as a dictator to save the city, which Cincinnatus does. And when it's over, walks back, gets back behind his plow and continues plowing. The model of Cincinnatus was often taught and almost never followed, except by George Washington.
As American exceptionalism began to flourish, the New World became a subject of great curiosity to visitors from the Old World.
The irony is that it was actually the French who thought that Americans were exceptional. The French, looking at the American constitutional experiment, at first were incredulous. They thought, you Americans are so different. You don't really need all these constitutional checks and balances. Well, the last laugh, you might say, was with Madison and Hamilton. Because 2 years after the Constitutional Convention, there comes a revolution in France. And in fact, it turns out that all those checks and balances would probably have been a good idea.
Well, really, although the term American exceptionalism doesn't really get used until the 1920s as an official kind of coinage that occurs, but I always find the term to be part and parcel with the 1840s with Manifest Destiny, something unique about America, that God was willing, the city on the hill, God wanted us to be from sea to shining sea. And so you really feel American exceptionalism in the fact of the westward expansion movement.
We were blessed to have abundant natural resources, but it wasn't our resources alone that enabled such extraordinary behaviors, such as work ethic, creativity, and inventiveness. Here, settlers found a system that maximized the individual's freedom and resourcefulness.
American exceptionalism is really a great term, and it is something that is very special to us. And by the way, we have to be very, very careful to protect it and cherish it, because it can also disappear. But people have come over here and done so well and so beautifully, and they left places where they didn't do well, they didn't function, it wasn't working. So we really have got something very, very special that we have to take care of and really, truly cherish.
I believe that God put this land between the two great oceans to be found by special people from every corner of the world who had that extra love of freedom that prompted them to leave their homeland and come to this land to make it a brilliant light beam of freedom to the world.
Here in Ronald Reagan's speech, when he's talking about a city on a hill, he's saying that we've returned to who we really are as Americans, that we have always believed that we can be a beacon for the rest of the world and that we can be strong internally. And his message in the 80 campaign was just reinforced in that speech. We can have a strong economy. We can take care of our responsibilities. We don't have to be a policeman for the whole world, but we can be of assistance and we can have a strong defense. So my view is that Ronald Reagan thought we had to be internally just to be externally strong.
The love for freedom brought a steady stream of early immigrants, eager to test their own unique talents, to risk everything, to cross oceans, mountains, and plains, and feed our great cultural diversity.
You really had to be tough. You had to be tough to push out west. You had to be tough to settle in America. And I think it really changed the DNA of the people who came to live in this country.
It wasn't necessarily the rich that came to this country. If people were rich, they didn't want to risk coming to the United States and starting over. We didn't see the ruling class come to this country. They stayed in their own country if they were the ruling class. We didn't see nobility necessarily come to the United States. We got something better. We got the risk takers, people who wanted to come here, work hard, and create something new because they saw America was an opportunity for a better way of life. That's what America offers. That's exceptional. I am a 7th generation Iowan, and I am so grateful for these risk takers that came to the country because they saw that in their country, they wouldn't do as well and their children wouldn't do as well as if they came to the United States and again, played out their lives on this rich canvas called liberty.
We always talk about United States self-reliance and individualism, rugged individual. Where did that come from? It came from the idea in the 18th and 19th century that people from Europe originally and then from all over the world could come in this vast new expanse, claim their due with 160 acres, 320, 40 acres, and then they would be self-reliant. They'd have to make their own food, they'd have to grow their own crops, they would make small-knit communities, a city-state, so to speak. And out of that experience of battling nature, embodying a shame rather than a guilt culture, a tragic view of the universe because they were battling nature in a very dramatic fashion, they became individuals. They were not European classes. They were not factions. Now, of course, with only 1% of us farming, the question is, do we still have those values in the independent trucker, the independent hardware store owner? I think we do, even though it's transmogrified off the farm.
You know, there's something about wanting to be an American by choice. It's something worth noting. A lot of folks who want to work hard and want to have the freedom that we have here in the United States. They want to come here and they work hard from the moment they get here. And those values, of love and admiration for America, they're transmitted to their kids.
E pluribus unum, out of many, one. American exceptionalism attracted millions of immigrants eager to help build this country.
Here, immigrants were encouraged to pursue their own dreams. Here, your past did not define your future.
More people come to the United States than all other countries' immigration numbers combined. And so it's sort of, proof of the pudding is in the eating. The United States is exceptional. That's why everybody wants to come here and nobody seems to want to leave.
Io ho personalmente un motivo di gratitudine nei confronti dell'America e ciò rappresenta per me un legame anche emotivo e non soltanto politico o ideale. Circa un secolo fa, nel primo decennio e nel secondo decennio del Novecento, 5 fratelli di mia nonna emigrarono per ragioni di lavoro negli Stati Uniti d'America. e ricordo l'aiuto che dettero alla famiglia e che dettero alla mia famiglia in termini di poche decine di dollari, che erano molti per noi perché venivamo da una famiglia piuttosto povera. Io so che senza di loro non avrei potuto diventare quello che poi sono diventato, fare tutte le scuole, diventare un uomo libero, fare un lavoro, più di un lavoro fatto. E perciò ancora oggi sono grato alla loro memoria e sono grato all'America per avermi consentito tutto questo.
The American dream is continually experienced by immigrants longing for freedom and opportunity. Zoditu Ashanaki fled Ethiopia in the 1980s. She now owns her own hair salon in Columbia City, Washington.
When I was in Ethiopia, most of the time, either we run from the government so we don't get killed, or we don't be suspected too that we're plotting something. So then after a while, it's just time for me to leave Ethiopia, so I just escaped to Sudan. My picture of America when I was in Ethiopia, we always wonder how it looked like, living there. And that was a dream for everybody. We wanted to go there. We wanted to have a better life and live just freely, especially freedom of speech. You have everything what you want to do in life without somebody telling you, no, you can't do this. And I'm thinking, what is American dream? It's a blessing to be here. My American dream is really, especially now being a single mother, owning my own salon and raising a child, and going to school and achieve all I can. And there's nothing to stop me if I really wanted to do anything in my life. That's the American dream for me. America is an exceptional place, and because I think opening the door for all the nations that needed to come here and make their dream come true.
Zoditu has added much to her community. She holds an annual Thanksgiving event for the needy in her neighborhood.
I started because of my daughter, and I was driving in the freeway, and there was a homeless people sleeping under the bridge. That made me to think I have to do something. That was a blessing for me to share that with them. So we decided to do a Thanksgiving meal. I started doing that in the salon so that I can give back to the community. And my staff, they always support me doing things like that. That means a lot to me. So, yeah.
In 1775, on the eve of the American Revolution, Founding Father Dr. Joseph Warren, president of the Massachusetts Congress, addressed a crowd gathered to commemorate the Boston Massacre.
Our country is in danger, but not to be despaired of, said Warren. On you depend the fortunes of America. You are to decide the important questions upon which rests the happiness and the liberty of millions yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves.
America challenges you to a fight every day, but it wants you to win it. And that to me is so inspiring. And I'm up for the fight. And so is America. It wants me to win. It doesn't want to see me lose. And I think that's what makes this country so inspiring to live in.
American exceptionalism means that in this country, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what you look like, that anybody in this country can be somebody special and can make a contribution.
In the preamble of our Constitution, it's clear that the American people are responsible for protecting their freedom and securing the blessings of liberty.
You look at what happened at Valley Forge, we found a way. You look at what happened at Pearl Harbor. After that came a great victory at Midway. You looked at what happened at Kasserine Pass in the beginning of World War II. You look at what happened when those men were surrounded at the Chosin Reservoir. You look at what happened during the time of the Depression. Americans always find a way. We're just tough, and we don't accept defeat.
Throughout our history, citizens have willingly left the quiet life to defend America and her gift to the world.
There are two people that are necessary for the future of a society, for the existence of a society. You have a group of people that teach a society, but then you have a group of people that protect and defend the society. It's a warrior class. And the warrior class believes in this great country. The warrior class believes in exceptionalism. The warrior class believes that when that flag is raised, what it means and the sacrifices of those who went before them. There's a great motto for the 82nd Airborne Division right outside the headquarters. It says, the guardians of America's honor. And that's the ideal of protecting the exceptionalism of this country so that our children and grandchildren can continue to enjoy the freedoms and liberties that others have had.
The men and women who grew up during the Great Depression, who went to war, who rolled up their sleeves and made do with less, did what they knew was necessary to preserve our freedom.
In World War II, we called it the can-do spirit of America, and it was exhibited by ordinary citizens who went into the armed forces and did great things, which is reflective of that American spirit that we can do almost anything.
They became known as the greatest generation.
We were kids. We were proud to be Americans. And we showed it in World War II. As a kid, I wanted to be a boxer, I guess. One of the things I wanted to do.
Carmen Michelli was 17 when he joined the Army. With his parents' permission, he volunteered for a year of military service in April of 1941. 8 months later, everything changed.
All we know is that Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and we're in it for the duration. Well, D-Day was June 6th of 1944. Well, we lost an awful lot of kids in Normandy. Many of us got hurt. We landed in Utah 28 days later. The first combat we had, the first time we got shot at, was on the 4th of July of 1944. And I'm sure everybody was scared, so was I. But when you're an infantry sergeant, as I was, you know, you got your buddies, you bond with these guys. You can't help but bond with them. And you protect each other. That's the name of the game in the infantry. Protect each other. I was in 5 major campaigns. I was wounded in 4 of them. Last being the Battle of the Bulge. After the breakthrough at St. Lo, glorious days. We had our tanks, we're riding tanks, going through these little French towns, and Vive la France, Vive l'Américain, and French girls, and flowers, and wine, and champagne.
For his service, Carmen Michelli received 4 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star for Valor. Not surprisingly, his most vivid memories are of those who made the ultimate sacrifice.
He was the kid in my outfit, Lazar. And Lazar was a member of my platoon. He was a loner. He was a loner type guy, always making a mistake, always going the wrong way for some reason. Sometimes he didn't know his left from his right. But he saved my life. Yeah, his name was Lazar. Now, only mine, he saved the whole squad. He went the wrong way. Instead of going this way, he went that way and bumped into a machine gun. Took a machine gun, knocked him out. Bullets through him. He was killed. He got the Distinguished Service Cross, second from the Congressional Medal of Honor. For a guy that had that kind of guts, I wish I'd known better. But I didn't. So he gave his life. Name was Lazar. When I came out of the service, I was mixed up. Not only me, it affected everybody. I spent about a year in hospitals trying to figure out what the hell it was all about. It took me a little while to get into it, civilian life and people and nobody shooting at you and trying to figure out what you want to do in life. It took me a little while. After the war, I opened up a restaurant. I guess everybody was in there, anybody who was anybody, including a couple of presidents. If you got the will and the ambition to do something, you do it. And you got to have the guts and the gumption to do it. And everybody's got a shot at it. I had my shot and took advantage of it.
As we've seen, American exceptionalism has many definitions, centering on the individual, on dignity, and on liberty.
My American dream was actually becoming a professional baseball player. But in those days, you got paid $2, and my father was in the real estate business in Brooklyn and Queens, and I always loved real estate, so I decided I'll go into the real estate business. I made a good decision.
And the fact of the matter is, how do you explain that 300 million people produce 25% of the world's goods and services, created a multiracial, stable government in a sea of anarchy and chaos, and within the 20th century created the world's greatest economy and defeated fascism and then communism, Japanese militarism, German Nazism? How did they do that? Nobody else has ever done that.
America is a world leader in agriculture, industry, science, medicine, and technology.
We have this pantheon of Americans, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, and they all have one thing in common. In today's world, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, they're all eccentric. Some of them drop out of college. Some of them have an idea. Some of them have a strategy. The majority doesn't believe it's possible. But in America, we tend to root for the underdog. We tend to root for the individualist, the exceptionalist. And that's part of this culture that, just as we see the country exceptional and unlike what we see in Europe or elsewhere, so within the United States, we're much more forgiving of people who stand out or stick out.
Throughout our history, we have risen to great challenges, sometimes out of necessity, but often out of the determination to create a better future.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
I mean, they thought this was impossible dream to send human beings to the moon. When he said that, the total amount of space-time for the U.S. was 15 minutes suborbital. Only one human being had even been in orbit, and that was a Russian, Yuri Gagarin. There wasn't a whole lot of experience in the world, and here the president says, we're going to go to the moon.
We have ignition sequence start. Engines on. 5, 4, 3, 2. All engines running.
President Kennedy's words in 1962 echoed the core beliefs and challenges set forth by our founders.
Eagle, Houston, we see you on the steerable, over. 30 seconds, over. Contact light. We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
After we landed, we had this 2 hours before Mike Collins came around again. So that was enough time for us to have a meal, but that was also time for me to do what I thought was appropriate for human beings having just accomplished something rather exceptional. You should maybe pause and give thanks. So I just asked the world to give thanks in their own way, and but my particular way was to serve myself communion, since I was an elder in the Presbyterian Church. And, of course, when Neil got down the bottom of the ladder, he said,
"That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
When our space shuttle retires in 2011, we'll need a Russian space launch to visit the International Space Station.
But our program has become too politicized, and we will lose number one position that this country invested a lot of money in the 60s and 70s to be exceptional Americans. And we're going to lose that American exceptionalism if we allow politics to get in and muck it up. We'll be second. The Chinese are going to get back to the moon before we could. And if we're not careful, the Russians will get to Mars before we do. Why can't Americans land on Mars permanently? They go to Mars and they become settlers, permanent. And we know how to do that. And we can do that and lead the world as American exceptional leaders.
I believe that one of the greatest threats to American exceptionalism is the idea of some, particularly on the left, who feel that somehow there should be a redistribution of wealth.
And I would hope they could learn that any money they receive is coming out of the pockets of other Americans. The government does not have any money of its own except that which it takes out of the pockets of other Americans.
If you tax rich people and give the money to poor people, you're going to get lots and lots of poor people and no rich people. The dream in America, as I see it, has always been to make the poor rich, not to make the rich poor.
I want to be clear. We're not trying to push financial reform because we begrudge success that's fairly earned. I mean, I do think at a certain point you've made enough money.
The notion expressed by President Obama that some people, once they're well-to-do, that don't need to make any more money is completely against the grain of the American tradition and of American exceptionalism as well. The truth is, profits create innovation. Innovation creates new products that people want. We saw it with the Wright brothers, who went beyond running just a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio, and went to North Carolina and basically invented the airplane. We see it today with Apple Computer that didn't stop just making a computer. They've gone on to create the iPad and the iPod and so many other things. The truth is, you can strip away the profit motive and you're not going to have the kind of innovation that's made America great.
A rising tide, it raises all boats. If I could beg for one dream of America of the future, long after I'm gone, is an America that tries to balance up rather than down.
I don't think that grassroots Americans are very well informed about what makes America an exceptional country, or what are the real bases of our tremendous rise in prosperity at the same time that we kept our freedom.
We don't have a tragic view of America anymore in our schools, that a bunch of very brave people, flawed individuals, but nevertheless great, came out west and they fought Native Americans. They had treaties, they broke them, they kept them, and out of nothing they created San Francisco. We don't have that narrative. Today, if you go into the schools and you study, say, World War II, it is Rosie the Riveter, women winning the war. It is Hiroshima. It is probably the Japanese internment. 3 negative things, so to speak. If I ask today's youth, do you have any idea what the 6th Marine Division did on Okinawa? Do you have any idea how Patton got to Bastogne? The answer would be no, no, no. So we have created a youth that expects all of these things that we see in our life. Lights to go on, water not to have bacteria in it, get on a plane and fly all over, even though that doesn't happen almost anywhere else. And then we never ask our question, why did that happen here? And it's because we had this system and these ancestors who did all these wonderful things.
Today, Americans lack faith in our political leaders. The Founding Fathers envisioned citizen politicians who would leave their homes, farms, and businesses to serve the nation and then return to private life. Now it's a full-time job just to raise the money to stay in office.
And the scariest number of all that we have seen in recent years, at least for me, is that only 21% believe that government has the consent of the governed. From the beginning, that has been a founding principle of our government. The governments derive their only just authority from the consent of the governed. And if we don't have that, then our government's in trouble. But it's that self-governing step of recognizing that the actions you take as an individual, that the actions that you take in contributing to your community are more important in terms of where our society is going than any of the things we do in the political sphere.
All because of the arrogance and hubris of government officials. These people honestly don't know they don't know. If I can put it the way I like to, the most immoral act a government can ever perpetrate on its citizenry is to enact policies that have the effect of destroying the production base from whence all benefits ultimately flow. And these people have no idea what it takes to produce output. They don't mean to hurt people, but they are hurting huge amounts of people.
The cause of freedom is the cause of America. Each of us must be prepared to meet great challenges to ensure that we remain a safe, free, and prosperous nation.
And what I like about this period, as divided as it appears to be in the United States, is that we're talking about ideas again. We're talking about how we started. We're not always getting it right. We're not always reading it correctly, but we're reading it. If we stop that, then we cease to exist. If we keep doing this, we emerge as a stronger nation.
Benjamin Franklin put it entirely correctly at the end of the Constitutional Convention when he said, you have a republic if you can keep it. Can we keep it? That depends on remembering what it has been when we say that we are a republic.